Well, it is always so nice to chat. I love catching up with Heartland. Stepping into this season, the last season felt so complete. It felt like it really wrapped up so much in many ways and even referred back to the first season again.
Mm-hmm.
Where is Amy this season?
This season is the season I was waiting for after last year. And those who have seen season 14 know that it was a very traumatic experience for not only the viewers watching the show, for all of us actors that were living these moments every day on set. And it was exhausting, I have to say. Season 14 took a lot out of me because not only were we dealing with very emotional, heavy storylines, but it was also the first year that we were filming during a pandemic. So we were all wearing masks at all times. Obviously, and if we were on camera, we would remove them, but testing multiple times a week. There was just a lot of added extra safety measures that were exhausting, So it wasn't just the storylines themselves, but on top of that, there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And, part of me thinks that maybe that actually helped the realism of what was going on screen, because many of us were frustrated and we were trying to work through just a show that we've become so used to, the motion and working together. And all of a sudden it was a completely new experience for us. And it was frustrating because we're a very close group of people and we've been together for, at that time, 13 years. And so coming into season 14 and having all these restrictions, like, no, you can't eat lunch together. No, you can't hug each other. No, you can't, it was all of a sudden I was like in a classroom going, but wait a minute, these are my friends and I want to play at lunch and I want to hug them. And so there was a big learning curve for everyone, as with everyone in the world. We're still going through that, but that could have added to the realism for season 14, because I know many of us were frustrated and we were feeling a little bit emotional, more so than regular seasons before. So season 14, I was happy to move on from. I have to say, I thought it was a very beautiful season. I thought that everybody did a phenomenal job of creating those stories and making them so real, and honoring the character of Ty. That was first and foremost in that journey in season 14, is that this character has been with us since the beginning. Very, very important character to not only Amy and the family, but to the fans as well. So we needed to honor that story. And so in season 15, I went in and I chatted with the writers early on and I said, I'm ready for Amy to move forward, but I don't know if I'm ready for Amy to move on. And I say that in a way where I still want to honor that character of Ty. I still want to very much honor the love that Amy and Ty shared, but I don't want to be sad Amy. Like there's only so long you can play just a very emotional state. So I believe that season 15 is a beautiful balance of Amy and the family moving forward and starting to get back to their normal lives, if you can say that, but still honoring that character and not forgetting him. So that's kind of season 15, is the fact that we will still see Amy working with horses. We'll still see that relationship with Amy and her daughter and Amy and the family. And we get to see characters like Grandpa and Lisa take on more responsibility than maybe is in their comfort zone. And we get to see Tim just being Tim. There's lots of funny moments between him and Grandpa Jack. And there's lots of heartwarming moments too. We introduce Jessica back into the mix. She was introduced in season 14 and now she comes back, and Tim and Jessica announced that they have gotten married while they were traveling in Peru and wherever else they might have been. So that's really cool too, because we get to see Tim in a whole new light. We've never really seen him as a settled married man on Heartland ever. So this is kind of a unique thing for Amy and Lou to go through as well, because of course, this is the first time that their dad has been remarried since he was married to their mother. So there's lots of interesting things going on, lots of horses, lots of all the things that I know Heartland fans have loved over the years. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the fan feedback for this season.
Well, I love the fact too that, talking about grieving on a show, I mean, so many shows, especially ones not even as long lived as Heartland, it's something that happens over a couple episodes. And so I find it fascinating that talking about Heartland, you're talking about a show that spends a season grieving a core character. And it is fascinating because that's not really something you see in most shows.
But you also don't see the longevity that Heartland has in most shows. So we have the opportunity to treat occurrences in life in real time, and not necessarily real time, but we have 15 years for these characters to grow and evolve and try new things and to lose people and to have new people come into their lives. And not a lot of shows get that opportunity. So we started this show with Amy as a teenager and her first real love. And then we get to see her on a real timeline. And I say real timeline because I was going through similar things in my own life when Amy was, I started falling in love at the same time as Amy. I got married at the same time as Amy. I think that you go through those fundamental life growing experiences in your 20s. At least that's how it happened for me. That's how it happened for Amy. And I was able to go along that journey with her and experience very similar things. So for an audience's perspective, I have people write to me that say, I'm the same age as you. And I was going through all of those same things in my life as Amy was experiencing them. And it really helped to ground me and to understand that I'm not alone in this, or, feeling this way is normal. And so I think that that's really cool that we have had that opportunity to create real stories and to share them over a real timeline. And going back to your point about how certain shows, they rush through death or grieving or really any storyline, Heartland has the opportunity to take the time it needs because we have that time. And I hope that we have much more time to tell more stories. But a regular show that might only have 3 seasons, you need to wrap those stories up quickly because you need to move on to the next thing. And so I'm really proud of Heartland for staying true to its roots and not trying to deviate into something that it's not. I feel like every year our writers get together and they do such a fabulous job of keeping that family and those family dynamics and values real and true to each character and true to the Heartland world.
And it feels very organic. That's one of the things that I love too, is that it's, because you have the time and everything else and just the way your team works together, it always feels so organic, which is amazing.
Well, thank you for saying that, because we do. We strive to keep it real and we strive to keep it organic. And I think it helps that a lot of us live similar lives to our characters as well. And I always joke that I get up in the morning and I'm doing my prep for my character right off the bat because I'm going out, I'm feeding my horses, I'm doing farm chores, and then I go to work and I pretend to do all those things again. So it's sort of like I'm continually training to be Amy. And in that sense, I'm keeping that character alive. I'm keeping that character real. And if a character doesn't evolve and grow, it becomes boring. But at the same time, as humans living in that real timeline, things don't happen as fast in most people's lives as they do on your regular series or television show. And so Heartland has to find that balance of keeping things exciting and keeping the audience engaged, but creating real life timelines that relate to each character and that each character can go through during a season and not feel rushed. But at the same time, people aren't just waiting for paint to dry. It's got to have some movement. It's got to have some interesting things. And each of those characters, and that's what our jobs as actors is to do, is to find those interesting character traits that keeps the audience coming back and engaged with those people.
And, speaking of people, you're Lindy, the 2 girls that play your daughter. I mean, it feels so wonderful seeing that relationship this season, because I think as the 2 of them have gotten older now, obviously there's even more to it. What was it like working with them this season? Because I'm sure it's different every time.
I love those girls so much. And we couldn't have found better people, they're little people, to play this role. They were only 6 months old when they were cast as Lindy on Heartland. And we never would have known, they weren't talking, they weren't walking. It was just a feeling I had. I was in the audition room. It was Heather Conkey and myself. And when Christina and Mike, their parents, walked in the room with these 2 beautiful little babies. They were so tiny. And we looked at them and they had these bright, big blue eyes. And they just looked up at us and just smiled. And I turned to Heather and I was like, them. Like, we have to go with them. They just lit up a room at 6 months old. And it's such a strange thing for a child to grow up in this adult world, because when they come to set, they're surrounded by, there's 75 crew members that are all standing there and us, and we're all adults. And that's the world that they've grown up into. So they're very comfortable around adults. And I find that every year they understand a little bit more. In the beginning years, we would play games, especially Graham and I would get together and we'd say, okay, like what fun game can we play at the beginning of this scene so that they're engaged and happy and want to be here? Because that was right from the get-go. Graham and I got together and we're like, who cares about what's supposed to happen in this scene? Let's make every scene with them fun, because we want this to be a fun place. We want them to love us and not be like, oh no, I have to go to Heartland. Like, we want this just to be a fun time. So if there was something that was scripted that they had to do, we would turn it into a game, and we would start that game well before the cameras started rolling. So if there was a kitchen set or something there, we would pretend that we were baking with them and we would cook something and we'd just really get involved. And then all of a sudden it was action and we'd stand up and Graham and I would do our scene. And if we were engaging with them, we would turn and say whatever our line was to them, and they would just answer organically. And so it just was kind of one of those things. And then they would get confused because we would do it again and again and again, the same thing. And they're like, are these people crazy? They just asked me that question. But I think over time, they started to understand what we do. Is it just basically a game? We're playing pretend, and we like to play pretend the same every time for a bunch of times in a row. And over the years, their understanding and their grasp of the world that we're creating just became so real, to the point where I think they were maybe 3 years old. And I believe it was Ruby. And she only wanted to be referred to as Lindy because that was who she was on set. And so I would say, hey, Ruby, come here. And she'd be like, I'm Lindy. I'm like, okay, so you get the game. Perfect. And right from the get-go, they always called me Mum, because I thought if they called me Amber, it might be confusing. If they called me Amy, it wouldn't make sense on camera. So we just picked a name because they called their own mother Mummy. So I said, well, let's have something that's similar, but a little bit different so it doesn't confuse them. So I said, how about Mum? And they still call me that. They're 5 years old and they call me Mum. And if it happens on camera, it's fine because, it makes sense with the story. And so it's been a real learning experience for myself too, because as you know, I've worked with horses for the last 15 plus years on the show. And there's a different way that you approach each scene when you're working with horses than you would if you're just working with a fellow actor. So it's the same thing with kids. It's the fact that you just have to keep a very calm energy. You can't let anything work you up because then it stresses them out. So you just have to keep relaxed, calm, have a fun time. And then whatever happens, it happens. And going back to your point of the show feeling very organic, that's where it all stems from, is kids and animals, being in the moment. And that always really helps me. And it makes me realize that as an actor, the more present you can be and the more just in the moment you are. And it's harder scene after scene because you're doing the same thing again and again. But I think that kids and animals have really taught me the most being on set, because it really shows me that organicness that we're trying to create.
And it's so funny because those are the two type of things you're not supposed to put in a scene. But yeah, I mean, you guys.
And really, those are the two things that I love the most about working on Heartland, are kids and animals. And yes, I will say they are definitely the two most challenging things, because you can't tell a horse, well, we're going to be done this scene in 15 minutes. So just chill out for a minute, get it done. And same with kids. You just have to go on their timeline. And if they're done, they're done. And that's the thing too, is new directors that come on the show that haven't had a lot of experience working with kids and animals. I always mention to them, you probably have 3 takes max. We can't be doing 5, 6, 7, 8 takes because you'll lose them. So they're on board for usually 3 takes, and we'll get 3 really good takes. But if things aren't worked out by then, you're kind of out of luck. So it's those things that you have to know going into it as well. And if it's a big camera move or there's a lot of technical things involved, then I say, go ahead and I'll do my part, but we'll leave the kids and animals out of it while we practice and rehearse this again and again and again till we have everything technically perfect, or as perfect as we can get it. Because you obviously never know what kids and animals are going to do. So sometimes you have a perfect setup and then they get there and they run the opposite direction or something happens, which is understandable. But that's the biggest thing, is to be so prepared with our team so that when that horse or that child or whatever it might be that we're working with that has a shorter attention span, you're ready for it. And I think that's really the key to success when working with kids and animals, is being fully prepared, and also being fully prepared for things to go completely the opposite of how you imagined it and to go with it. And sometimes that's when the most real moments happen, is when you just go with it. And there's many times when I'll have a scene that I have specific lines and things I'm supposed to say to a horse or to a child, and it's going a totally different direction. And I just adapt and I start improvising and going with it. And sometimes those are the best moments, because they're just real, and you're feeding off it and you're going, okay, this is really cool and this is working. And it might not be set up as it was intended, but sometimes it's a whole different direction for that scene that works really well.
Well, I think even just the little stuff, because the last scene in the first new episode, where you kind of cuddle her, and I'm not sure which one of the actors it was, but cuddle her up in your arms, and it's such a beautiful little moment, and it's usually, I expect, quite tough to pull off with the kid to have that tender kind of moment, but it was wonderful. I
have to say, the fact that those girls have grown up on this show and they've grown up around me really makes it so easy, because I want to say that they genuinely love me and they love being around me, and they come out to my farm on weekends and I spend time with them. And so when they see me in the morning, they run up and they give me the biggest hug and, oh, Mom, I'm so happy. And so when we get to do those scenes and I get to cuddle with them or snuggle, or we both enjoy it. So it's not acting, and it's not saying, okay, now you have to hug her. And then we're, it's real. Right. And I think that really goes to show you the time you put in outside of the show or outside of being on set really makes a difference when it comes to both kids and animals, because they trust you. They want to be with you. They know that you are a safe place. And the fact that I have known these girls since they were 6 months old and worked with them on set for that many years, that to me is something that's really special, because it's, again, talking about the longevity of a show. You don't usually get to be able to put in that time to get that close with your fellow actors. And that's why it was such a difficult season for all of us when Graham left, because it had been 13 years of working together. And so all of a sudden there's this void in the character dynamic, and not just the character dynamic, but all of us on set. And so it was a very different experience. And I think that it makes the show more real, because the characters themselves are missing that person, but so are all of us as actors. So it's kind of this weird, Heartland's a very strange entity. It's like kind of where these scripted stories meet real life. And I really do feel like the Heartland family is my family. And we're all so connected that when you see things on screen that you're like, wow, they look like a real family, it's because we feel like a real family. And you don't get that opportunity a lot on other television series that just don't have the longevity to get there.
Well, the other side of it is, of course, the locations and how beautiful it is. And I'm not even sure if I've asked this before, but I'm curious from your perspective, is it a bit of a postcard to the world to be like, if you haven't been to this area, why haven't you come yet? Is that kind of the idea?
100%. I mean, I meet people all the time that are just traveling from wherever they might be. Australia, Europe, France, like all these places where people come to High River, they come to Millerville, they come to these these areas of Heartland because of Heartland. And they've been watching this show for over a decade. They want to experience it for themselves. I've got a story for you. It was 4 or 5 days ago, I was at the grocery store. I ran into this young woman from France. She didn't speak very good English. And she said to me, I want you to know I moved here because of Heartland. And
wow.
I was in France, and this was only about a year ago. She said, COVID hit, everything locked down. I was depressed. I just wasn't myself. And I thought, what makes me feel happy? And Heartland was the answer to that. She said, Heartland, when I'm watching Heartland, I get absorbed in that world. I see the mountains. I see that scenery. I want to live there. That will make me happy. So she picked up everything and knew no one, moved here, and is now living in the Heartland area because of the show. And she said, I've never been happier. I love this place. It's my dream. And to me, that is just, it's so inspiring for what we do, because we create the show. This is our job. And I think people forget that, we are going to work to do a job. Even though I love my job very much, it doesn't feel like a job. But when people watch the show, they get consumed in this world. And the world of Heartland is it's a magical place. It really is. And I feel it when I'm watching the episodes. I'm like, wow, it's a magical place. And I think that that's really cool for all of us who make the show and create this world, is to know that it is so inspiring to people from around the world, and that they see those family values. They see that beautiful vista. They see the horses. They see the magic of it, and they want to experience it for themselves. And that makes what we do all the more worthwhile.
That's amazing. That is a great story. I've heard about people moving around, leaving the city to get back to the country. And I think it speaks to that too, that Canada has so much to offer in that way. You don't need to live in the city necessarily.
True.
The last I'd like to know is, what is the feeling like now? I mean, you must feel a bit like a pro walking into set after this many seasons. Does it all come back the moment you get back on set when you're doing, this last season? I know there's obviously still challenges because of COVID and everything else, but was it, is it something that just comes back and you're there?
Like riding a bike?
Yeah, riding a horse.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, that's a good question. I haven't been asked that before, which congratulations, because there's been a lot of questions in the last 15 years. I feel rusty when I step back on set after, because we usually take 6 to 7 to 8 months off in between filming. When I step back, the first week I'm back on set, I definitely feel out of my groove. And I think because when you work on a show, you're there day after day. You're there for 12 to 14 hours a day, and you just get used to it. You go into the motion, and that's what you do. But then when you get 7, 8 months off of memorizing and getting into your character and knowing, all the things because there's so many different little subtleties that make it real, but you can't really think about, like props. Like when you walk into a room and you pick up a prop, well, you have to remember what line you picked up that prop and what hand it's in and how you grabbed it. All of these little things that people don't think about, because for continuity, when the camera's over here, you have to grab it at the same time and you have to be holding it the same way. And so that always takes a little bit for my brain to wrap my head around. So it's not just the memorizing of the lines. It's like, oh yeah, right. My brain has to click into that other gear where, okay, when I say this, I'm going to grab my cup of coffee and I'm going to sip it when I say this. And then I'm going to put it down with this hand. And we're very lucky. We have a great script supervisor. His name's Wayne Pells. I'll give him a shout out. And he's been with us all 15 years. And he watches for all that. So I'll be doing a scene and I'll talk and I'll say, and then after this, we want to go to the barn and then, come back and ride later. And so then we'll do the scene again and he'll be like, Amber, you have to pick up your cup when you say go to the barn. And then you have to put it down when you say ride to the, I'm like, okay, thank you for remembering, because it's really hard for me to remember all these things. So I do feel rusty when I come back into into the show after we've had a break. And it takes me usually about a week to get into the rhythm of things. And then I feel like, okay, yeah, this is old hat and I can do this. But I always try to limit my prop handling and my moves and just the technical aspect of it. I try to limit that and help myself out for the first week so that I can just really focus on my lines and, just get back into it. But back to your point, I think that all of us have spent so much time together that we all know each other so well. And we all have different styles of how we prep for a scene and how we come into a scene. And so knowing how your other actors in a room work is also really important, I believe, because then you can honor each person's method or prep work and that kind of thing. If you walk into a set where you've never met or haven't worked with any of the other actors, it's a whole new learning curve because you have to say, okay, do they like to run lines? Do they not like to run lines? Do they want to have all the emotion in the rehearsals? Do they want no emotion in the rehearsals? Because I like to I'm a very collaborative actor in a scene, I think. So I like to be able to honor everybody's style and everybody's way that they function. Because then I feel like you get the best product, right? You get when you can all come together and say, okay, you like to do it this way. I like to do it this way. Let's mesh it together. It's like a good relationship, right? You're taking all the things that people are good at, how they excel, right? And then you put that all together and you say, okay, let's make a great scene. But everybody's different and every actor functions differently. So that's one of the things that I love about being on a series for this length of time with the same people is how everybody functions. And I can walk on set and I say, okay, I'm going to go run lines with Michelle and we're going to get this down and we're going to come back in. And it's just one of those things that knowing your coworkers and how they like to complete their day really helps with putting the whole final product together in a way that you can all be satisfied with.
Well, thank you so much for the time. It is so nice to catch up. I always look forward to the semi-annual or annual catch-ups for Heartland. And my fingers are still crossed that I'll be there eventually for a set visit if it ever makes sense again.
It's one of those things that has really changed the way that we film the show. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the time when we can get back to how it used to be, because it's taken a lot of the social aspect out of it, a lot of that camaraderie that we all share. And just the fact of, usually in between scenes, I would go and hang out with Sean Johnson and play music in his trailer. And we would, jam a little bit here, or I would go and have lunch with the Teamsters or the Wranglers and get to know, what they're up to. And it's really changed the way that we work. And for that, I hope that we can go back to at least, a little bit more of a community feel, or I think everybody in the world is hoping that right now. I don't think I'm alone in that. But yeah, it's just, I love what I do, but part of what I love is the people. And COVID has really kind of stopped that interaction and communication and just the social aspect of it. So I do hope that we can become season 16. Let's hope for season 16, a little bit more of that family feel off screen as well.
I really do feel like it's going to give us a better appreciation of community. When things change again for the better, I expect, I think it's going to make us appreciate it a lot more. Yes,
I fully agree.
Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Yeah, you too. Take care. And hopefully we'll be chatting about season 16 next.
Sounds good. Have a good day.
You too.